our meeting to order. This is the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, May 24th, 2024. Are there any modifications to the agenda? Seeing none, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none as well. Administrative business, we have minutes of our previous meeting of April 16th. Can I get a mover? Brian, seconded by Harj. Any questions or corrections? I just wanted to mention, I was talking to Tracy and she says some of these items that we talked about in the minutes are in progress, such as breaking out the category 1 program for the municipalities for the 2025 levy discussion. And I know, Brian, you're continuing to work on trying to get the ministry to change its freeze.
Yeah. If I could just,
Oh, yeah.
Am I good to send that letter out and go do some advocacy work?
Absolutely.
Okay. I didn't know if it was, I know Paul had asked if it was going to come back to the board prior, but I can share that with board members just so they know of what the content of the letter is.
Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Anything else on the minutes? All in favor? Carried. No business specifically arising from the minutes, so we can move on to item 4, budgeting and reserve plan. And Christine's got a report in front of us to direct staff to develop a budgetary reserve policy based on the feedback that we've given at the April meeting and some of the stuff we will give today. So, having everybody I know has read this, and we've also had some email interactions about other options. I think at the end of the day, we could see those if we want, but they're all bad financially if you want to get to that kind of level. So, I mean, part of it is trying to get our heads around some of this. And what puzzles me, just to kind of start the discussion, is the information talks about costs essentially increasing by 30% year over year, 24 to 25, right?
Cost, did you say?
Costs,
Yes.
yeah.
Mhm.
So how much, and there was information in there that on compensation, average compensation across the organization is about 65,000.
Mhm.
And during the budget, 2024 budget, we got a lot of information that I've just circulated about new hires. I was curious about a couple of things. One is, where are we in that 2024 hiring? Where are we in the 2025? How much of the 25 increase in costs are related to category 1? I'm assuming, based on the big jump, that almost all of it would be category 1. Yeah, I see Christine nodding.
That went into the business case that we submitted to the city. That was 1.5 for all the legislative changes.
That they didn't even put before council.
Correct. But that was staffing.
Right. Which kind of, to me, is an aside to the folks, the rest of the members of the committee. Much of this pressure is coming from London. London's only paying 65% of the freight. So you're picking up 35% of London's problem, maybe 30%. And they're not willing to put it as a business case, as using their monies to help expedite what the province has resulted in causing us. You remember a couple of years ago, we did have money from the city.
More than a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's more than a couple, where they recognized that there was pressure put on our regs and staff. So they paid for people. And now they backed away from that.
Did we, or did, I thought when Marcus was here, we decided, moved a motion that it should not just come from London, it should be spread out. If we need more people, it should be spread out throughout the whole organization, the membership.
Yeah, but we still, because of the pressure coming from London,
Had to.
we did put in the business case for the 2024 multi-year budget that they didn't even put before council.
But they did agree to fund it in the end. It was part of the whole.
Well, yeah, but, yeah, so, sorry, we're ultimately, we're wrestling with a compensation issue, right?
Well,
Because we got people, we need people to carry out all the duties, right?
So. That leads me into try to get my head around 100% where the deficit comes from. And I know there's depreciation. I've looked at some documents you sent. Depreciation is a number on there that shows it. It's a big number. But then I'm hearing 79% of our, like, when I go through the thing, it's like, okay, wages, when I'm seeing category 1, I'm seeing, okay, we have the ability to levy for this. And we do levy for it. So we shouldn't have. Can you get my head around where the deficit is coming from? Is it that we're not billing enough to our members?
Correct.
Correct.
Stop there, yes.
But then we look at 2023 and we get a surplus back. Where are the two correlated, or are they different matters?
They're not entirely correlated. When I look at 2023 actual results, where our other sources of funding, not levy, dropped because the grants didn't materialize or we deferred projects or whatever, for whatever reason, if that revenue fell in 2023, our costs correspondingly fell.
Okay.
But even more than that, because the costs, when I look at the actual audited statements, comparing the budget costs to the actual cost was $2.5 million less.
Yes,
Where the revenue was only $0.4 million.
yes,
So how do we square that circle?
better budgeting. And that's why I made the point in this document. If we're trying to levy, and we have to, based on what we think our plans are in the budget, we have to take that budget with a grain of salt, because we experience vast differences between budget and plans and actual results. That is sometimes very large.
So with that, sorry, there's a $1.2 million deficit showing on our budget,
In category 1.
category 1. What is driving that deficit in category 1? Is it we don't know if we're getting the funds? Or we know, is it just, okay, we're doing this work, we're not billing enough, boom, this is the deficit? Or if it's, okay, we're planning for this money to come in, but we're not showing it, because it might happen.
In category 1, no, it's insufficient revenue. If this is the body of the cost, if these, the 80% of those costs are people we need to do regs and planning and all of the mandatory work. If that number is true and 80% of it is wages, then there's a shortfall in funding. Full stop. Levy, fees primarily. Transfer payments from the province.
And fees are only $1.7 million, roughly.
Yeah, yeah,
And we're collecting roughly 50% of what it's costing us.
no, less.
Less, okay.
That's
And
an issue.
Yeah.
well, yeah, it's an issue, and there's no place to get the money from other than increasing fees, which we're not able to do.
At this moment.
In category 1 services.
Yeah,
Right.
we're focusing on category 1.
Yeah. And the province isn't likely gonna change, and they're not gonna help every conservation authority in the province, because they can't just help us and not everybody else. So. And the budget deficit, just building on Brian's case, is. That's excluding depreciation in your calculations?
What, the 1.2 deficit?
Yeah,
No, that includes depreciation.
okay, so. We're in the same place. Technically. That on a cash
On
basis,
cash basis, we're level,
Right.
we're good.
okay, but. We still have to deal with the reserve issue and the depreciation issue, which is all part of the levies.
Just for clarification. We are levying the municipalities enough to pay for the wages and the operations. It's the depreciation, which is a non-cash thing, is causing the deficit.
Not entirely, but largely. That happens to be the same amount.
I just have, and that's what there's correlations that may, okay, 1.2 and 1.2, that matches up, so that's what it is, but. I really want to get an understanding, a clear understanding in my head, and hopefully everybody else's. If you get it mine, you probably got everybody else's 5 minutes before that.
More now.
What are the line items where that deficit is truly coming from? Because we need to understand that, because we need, if we're gonna make a business case to the city. Or all our members, I think more, we need to go, okay. I need to be able to justify, and everybody else around the board table needs to go back and say, this is the reason why we have a deficit. In past years, that deficit has been made up with other funding. What is your interpretation of the year so far looking like that deficit in category 1?
See, I knew that question would come up. We're turning the projected deficit into a surplus.
So here's my other case on this. We have to look at what info to best use, and it has to be reliable. Our budget document is not reliable at data because it's not a good predictor of future of actual.
It's not the best predictor because experience has shown that things change.
It does.
However, I think from 2024 on, we're going to have more reliable budget data, particularly in category 1. So in the past, right, we didn't have this split. All our programs were dumped in one pot, 250 programs. Now we've got 180 of them are in category 1, and everything else is in other categories. It's the everything else that fluctuates a lot with grants.
And how does that play out?
You may not get, but this is gonna, I think in future, this category 1 stuff is gonna look far more stable.
So in the budget, the other stuff, how is it shown in the budget? Does it create, so budgets are numbers, right? So you can play around with them a little bit about what, if you have a deficit, okay, but if you're showing, okay, we're gonna get this grant and we're anticipating this expense, but it's gonna be covered by a grant. It's pretty easy to get rid of a deficit in that one if you either show the money coming in and the expense, or you don't show it and you don't show it unless it's secure. Is that the practice that we're using now in the other categories?
Well, the other categories, part of that money then flows into category 1 to cover the overheads, right? So your budgeting and what you're showing us for category 1 does reflect the budget, the
Expectation.
for 2025 grants in category 3 that are helping to fund category 1.
Right.
So when you're right, when you look at the overall budget, it's budgets are points in time.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
But we're trying to have, if you're using reliable, so my point is that, okay, if you look at the year-end financials, that's a clear, that's truth.
At that point in
That's
time.
At that point in time,
Yeah.
that is more reliable data to say, this is the actual situation that we came to try to plan off of. The problem is if we plan off budgets, if we try to plan policy and moves off budgets, it's not truth. It's just that moment in time, and that was the plan. But if it's financial at the year end, if we try to make policy decisions, we should be using the most reliable data, and that's the year end data that we have. because that's what actually happens. It's more reliable. It may not be, because it's at the end of the day, it's financially audited. That's numbers, right? So if we're gonna make policy decisions about reserve policies and budgeting, I think we should be using that data set. Because it's more accurate to the facts. If we use budget, again, we're looking at 1.2 deficit. If we have a bunch of programs come online in category 3, and that can be transferred over, that increases the amount of transfers to category 1 that eats up the deficit of category 1. Somewhat.
Some.
I'm not saying it's canceling it out. I'm saying, so there's a correlation there, but if how we budget that categories 3 stuff depends on how big that budget is. If we say, okay, we're gonna apply for these grants, we don't show the cost and we don't show the revenue coming in because we don't know if we get it. Is that the current practice? Depending on, how do you decide whether to show something in those budgets?
It by and large, it lands on the manager's feel.
Your
Because
confidence level.
their confidence level, because they're the ones who have the relationship with the funding source. And through their conversations, if there's, really positive indicators that the grant should be coming to you, but there's no contract and there's no formal announcement, they'll put it in the budget.
The problem,
Partially put it in.
Yeah,
Not
partially,
fully.
but
problem going down that road is that there's only your corporate costs are finite, like they're set before the beginning of the year basically starts, because unless you're gonna bring on more people because you get more contracts. Like if they stay static and you're just adding contracts to help pay for that, then if you don't show the revenue of what you think you're gonna do, you're automatically putting yourself
I'm
behind.
saying if we're reasonably confident we're gonna get a contract, then it goes into the budget
And the cost goes into the
and the
budget.
cost goes in.
My understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if the revenue is budgeted,
Yes.
there's costs that go with it that are expected.
Yes.
If this money though doesn't show up, neither does the cost, because the practice of the organization is anything that's grant supported that needs people don't get hired until the money is contracted.
But the corporate
it's-
cost, that category, the corporate cost,
Yeah.
you still have Tracy, you still have Christine, those costs, those costs that we're gonna be, a certain proportion of that
Okay.
is now gotta be
Got it.
taken up by other funds. But the opposite works as well, that if you get extra, that can be moved.
Yeah.
So some of it does, so it's the practice of, and traditionally, like tradition would, like the history would show that staff are very good at, they usually bring in more than predicted on those. Yes or no? I don't know.
Usually,
Or is it mostly accurate?
It's been
Maybe.
really unpredictable the last few years with
Yeah.
the province. right?
So that's something we need to work on for advocating for, is predictability and funding. Because it does affect our budget too. And this is something we need to tell our municipal partners as well, is that, hey, when we're making these budgets, we don't know, and it does have an effect on, it may show a deficit, it may not, but it's really hard to predict about what kind of funding level and the effect it's gonna have.
But the dilemma for our member municipalities is that we have a budget
Mhm.
and it's based on
that's planned.
best plan.
Fine.
And the best plan at the present time shows a big increase.
Hmm.
And for the levy, so how do we, how do we explain that? So how do we reflect that in a budgetary policy? Because let me, sorry, one thing to finish, the reserve policy, I think is an easier, maybe a little easier.
It will be easier when we don't have deficits.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've outlaid for us at the previous meeting some pretty good policies of what to do with stuff, how to deal with the reserve.
Set that aside for the moment.
Right, let's
Figure out
focus
how
on,
to fund category.
yeah, so
So I did have some discussion when I was talking to Councillor Lehman.
Mhm.
It was very productive because they've faced some of the same challenges.
Mhm.
And recognizing that we do need to do a very good job of educating on the changes that have happened. and the consequences of that action. Of, he seemed to get it like that of, okay, we used to be able to use funds from over here.
Yeah.
That's changed. And that's the story we need to tell, is like, this is a different landscape. And as much as we all know, because we've been around the table, I don't think that our member municipalities get it enough.
They
To
don't.
be able to say that, hey, the way we were doing business before, throw it in the garbage, because we can't do it that way anymore. So if we have reserves, they have to go here. And they've been split up. So we do have some reserves, but we just can't use them for this, and these are way insufficient. The funding that we're asking for before, we can't do it the same way anymore, but we need to cover these costs, and we'll fight the demon with you at the province, because they're the ones who made this decision. But we need to have these costs taken care of. Other words, you're gonna get a bill anyway for it. Because we have to take it, if we can't fund that deficit through other work that comes in, you're gonna have, like, what do we do? If we don't have reserves, we're coming back. We have, and I have this written down here, is that when we're talking about reserve policies, operational reserves for category 1, I'm less concerned with, because we have the ability to levy what we need. If we're budgeting as accurately as possible, we should be able to just say, this is what we need every year. Category 3 and stuff, operational funding, that's a little bit more, I'm more worried about, because you don't have the ability to just go give me money.
But we have agreements
Yes.
now for those.
Yeah.
Which can be,
Campgrounds, campgrounds is what I'm worried about. So if all of a sudden you have operations in category 3 and all of a sudden you have something happens like COVID again, we don't have the funds necessary to carry us over. So that becomes more of a discussion about what do we need, what's the proper level to keep operations going, and what's the higher risk level versus what we need to keep going. What's the primary programming and what's that? If it's a low risk and we don't need to do it and it doesn't really affect anything, but it's nice to do, well, then you don't need all operational funds to keep it going. But people are expecting that part to open up, function.
Sure.
If you don't have the revenue coming in, there's still some stuff that has to take care of. But I think we need to make this very clear, and this is where we have to have further conversation with our municipal partners and say, the landscape's changed, and this is the financial, we didn't ask for this. We didn't have a chance to plan for it. The best time would have been like, okay, we're making changes, and in 4 years, you guys work towards this sort of model, or let us know how that works out. All of a sudden, it's like 2024, boom. We didn't get to change our finances. The reality on the ground is still the same, it's just the rules are different. I think that's where we need to really, and I'll be honest, I think Mayor Morgan and the people at London, they're dealing with it, like, they may not like it, but we need to make sure we do a job and say, hey, here's the situation. We need this money to get us to this point. Then we can say the next year's, I'm hoping the next year's, like after 2025, 2026 shouldn't be, I'm seeing nodding that we shouldn't be seeing 30% every year. That's on us if we do. We have a huge problem on our end.
Exactly. The submission we made to London had a massive increase in year 2024, a smaller but massive increase in 2025, and then it just tapered right off. Because we have to get to the point where category 1 is funded.
Sustainable.
Is sustainable, because it's not sustainable. And these are provincially mandated programs. And there are very few options for funding aside from the province and aside from the member municipalities and the fees that are capped.
So that's where we gotta go. We gotta go. If you don't wanna pay it,
1 fees.
Yes.
Yes.
you don't wanna pay it,
Yes.
get us the help to get us, start talking with us about getting the revenue from a different place. That's where we need to go. And then when it comes to, my worry though, is that what's gonna happen is like, oh, we have to pay this. Well, we don't have to pay this. This is a nice to have on category 3. We're just gonna take that money and then get rid of that, and we're gonna transfer it over there. And the province has given them that. Like, there's nothing stopping London, like, we have an agreement, but there's nothing in there to say like, no, we wanna do it.
Right.
And if London says we don't wanna do it anymore, we're done. Well, I shouldn't say that. What is the total cost? 607,000?
Overall for everything, London's portion was like 365,000 or 375,000.
The problem is with that is that London's also a big user of those programs. So it doesn't make sense to carry on those programs at that level. And then we don't have the funding coming over, but that's where we make the case of saying, hey, if you don't do these programs help this, and we need to be able to give them that number.
The board saw that number back in January.
The number coming from category
Yeah.
3 that's
It's
supporting
in the budget.
category.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
Well, it's in here.
it's like $1.4 million.
It's more than the contribution.
So big numbers saying here, if you get rid of this, now you're responsible for this. So we have to tell that story
In simple language.
in simple language, because simple language, if people are just being very simple, just going, well, I'm giving you 300,000 here, you take that and put it over there because that stuff's nice to have. If I gotta pay for but then if we can show them, oh, if you don't do this portion, you're actually getting this bigger, but
$607,000 of cost apportioning for category 3
yes,
goes into the pot.
yes.
What comes out back to category 1 is 759,000.
Yeah.
So it's more than what goes in.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a shell game. And this is
Well,
why it doesn't
no,
make sense to have
no.
category.
No, not really now, because we're in these category scenarios. If we get this municipal funding of 607,
Leverage it,
we are leveraging it to up to $4.5 million.
which is great, but that's, I didn't mean us doing the shell game, I'm talking for the province.
Yeah.
Because when they broke it out, it's like,
Yep.
you're doing the same thing as you were doing before, but now you have less, now you can't do it with reserves, you lose all this functionality to be able to, okay, we have this money over here, we got more so we can offset this.
Can't do that so much.
We need to sell that story anyway, so anyways.
So we got the reserve policy kind of off discussion for today. Budget policy we're creeping to, but what we're talking about right now is really 2025 budget and how to communicate to our member municipalities. So I'm wondering if, if you, I'm kind of wanting to hear from Harsh and Dean, because it's been you and me. And just want to hear how they're thinking about the stuff that's been talked about and where they see us going. So I don't know which one of you guys want to start.
I can jump in, but no, I echo very much what was just said previously, right? Because I always, when I talk to anybody, I said, just dumb it down to me, give it to me in simple format, because we can also be technical. And when they don't understand that part of it, I think the communication piece is the biggest impact. When they realize where the funding and how it's shifting, it's more manageable, right? And me coming from corporate world, if your budget numbers aren't right, how do you forecast, right? And in here, I'm finding the forecasting and budgeting, because the budgeting number may shift, might not be real, so I'm not sure how we forecast going forward, right? Like, how do we have a plan for that? So that's where I'm trying to wrap my head around, all the different, all those pockets of money. From that perspective, from the communication piece, I agree 100%, because I think we need to simplify that message, because otherwise I think we're gonna have a lot of people concerned. And, and they're gonna try to push back.
Well, if you want to grow something, you gotta feed it. So if you don't feed it, it's not gonna grow. And I'm going back to the meeting that you and I had in the mayor's office in March, Sandy. It just seemed like there's some elements in London City Council that you can create something out of nothing. And that may be true in some cases, but not in this case. If they want their 47,000 housing units, they have to pay into the system, and they're gonna complain, well, we're not getting out what we're paying into. Well, we can argue about that. We can go 14 rounds and argue about it. But the fact of the matter is, nothing will happen unless something gets paid in. So if they want the work done, then they gotta pay for it. And like Brian says, whether we do it or there's a shared agreement where the city provides people, one way or the other, it's gotta get done. So our staff and their staff can figure out what that game plan should look like. But I agree, we have to pay into the system to make it work in the short term until we can get our budgeting, our baseline data figured out for better budgeting.
2024 is our baseline now.
Yeah, so, but we've got, how do you say, it's one data point,
Yes.
right? So if you try to project off that data point, it could go off in different directions. So until
I do think, but the nature of the programs in category one are not.
They're just more stable.
They're not, they don't fluctuate so much. The level of planning work, the numbers of applications, obviously, they could change. The dollar value is partly due to whatever fee schedule we have and the idea of cost recovery. But we're not near 50% yet because of the cap in fees. So.
If we get a grant, we hire, additional people to support the work. Then if that goes away, what do we do with the people? We did, payroll and we did,
They're on contract.
this is a contractor, not like full-time position.
There's some that are full-time positions, but they're, again, they've got some base level funding, through the cost apportioning agreements already. But then as we take on new projects, for example, Environment Climate Change Canada, there's a couple of extra positions anticipated for that, and we'll be on contract for the duration of that program.
No, we have people here who've been here for 30 years who are technically contracted, who are funded now, have always been kind of funded by category 3 money, which is really interesting. And yeah, so I'm back with Brian on this, is that we have a communication story to tell about 2025. 2026 might be better because by then we'll have the land inventory stuff done.
Yeah.
We'll have a disposition policy. And I guess to a certain extent, we're kind of relying on, there's going to be money available, albeit one-time money, but it will alleviate some of the pressure. As you pointed out, the 24 and 25 has been ramping up to do all the stuff that we've needed to do because of the provincial changes. That there won't be that big increase in need. And some of those people who will be contract will be gone at some point. We've talked about that at the board a few times. So we've got a message about 2025 to tell our municipalities. Well, one thing is we've added all these people because the province made us in order to carry out their requirements. We need to remind, my position is we need to remind people. Because, I mean, you guys are all municipal councils, you don't focus on it. This is, oh, I remember. Of course not. We have to keep communicating that along the way. And not just drop it, well, it'll be at budget time, obviously, but I think in here at the board level, we need to start doing that messaging now. Because you're going to be in the best position to talk to your colleagues. So how do we get it simplified?
So, couple things on that. One, I don't know. Problem is I've learned is that nobody cares about the past. And the problem we're facing in 2025 is a different problem. Yeah, we asked for this in 2024, but it's a different problem of why we're asking for money this time. This large money, and that's for them to say yes, we really got to say, because we don't know when those people are leaving. It's not like, okay, this is the date. We'll have this less expense. I don't want to put that in people's minds. That's all they're going to focus on. It's when does that happen? Does it happen? Does it happen? Does it happen? There's also two different, we always have to remember there's two different conflicting views in the history behind we have to tell the story about why we're in this position of not fully funded to begin with. And when I spoke to Councillor Lehman, I was very candid, I'm like, so, you know, London's facing this high growth. And you need those resources for that level of service. A, we gotta understand what that level of service is that you want, so we can respond to it. B, though, we have different perspectives of we have a very diverse board of member municipalities. And I explain, like, a Sabo Bayfield, they don't have structures, they just have, you know, they're very, it's very one note. Toronto, one note, but a completely different note. We have, and so we face a lot of pressures from our rural partners of, they just don't have the, like, they're under their own financial different stress. There's a lot of force there behind it to try to repress that budget number going where it needs to go. So, and now London is there, they want the service level, but they may not want the number.
They're gonna have to.
So we have to tell that story about this, now with these changes, we have to tell it to everybody at the table in their own language, saying, whatever, we can't do that anymore. It's not an option. I get that you are under pressure, but we can't suppress, we don't have the means to do it. We don't have the reserves sitting there to bring down to do it. We don't have the ability, we have to do these programmings. That's out of the question. We have to do them. So we have to have the money for it. Now we're gonna do everything to try to, like, work with us on this. And that's when I look at, that's why I sent the London Reserve policy last night out, was because we need to mirror, if you want agreement, we need to mirror our partners and what they're doing. Because if they say no to our policy and it's the exact same as their policy or very close, so why is your policy good and ours is bad?
Yeah, we'll just wave that document in their face. and
So
say,
it's like, so this, we're trying to do what you're doing. And this was, their policy was just reviewed. Their policy was just reviewed in April of this year. Now, ours doesn't have the same, but if we use the same language and it's very,
Same.
for reserve policy.
Yeah.
Then we're there. If we're talking to the same partners at the table for, at the rural table, we gotta use the same language. And try to incorporate some of that, what, if we can, into that document. No, maybe not. I guess we gotta look where we can have those conversations of, yeah, you're getting pinched, we're getting pinched. You got these rules, we got these rules, and if we can use the same language, it becomes clearer for people to go, well, you're different than us. Because when I was talking to Councillor Lehman, it was, you know, there was a great discussion about, yeah, when I talked about our staffing problems and stuff like that, and we've had to increase, there was no like, you shouldn't have spent the money, it's like, oh yeah, we had to do that too. And it's true, because we got more stuff in common than, especially in planning, we're facing these pressures, so we gotta talk to them and say, okay. Yeah, you feel our pain on that one. Because you can't get staff either, we had to do this, they're probably gonna say, yeah, you had to do that. In fact, we want you to do more because we need more people. We need them to have the idea first and say, we want you to have more people in that department. Okay, do you want more people? Perfect. And you agree it's gonna cost more. But we gotta get rid of this deficit. And I think we have a pretty good, when you get your head around it. Category 1, we don't have the ability to use these funds over here as much as we'd like. There's no other way around it. We have to have this. In the past, we've tried to repress it. That's a mistake. We should not have done that. We have to get to here to be sustainable. Then we can talk about mitigating future, like we're not, again, if 2026 comes and I'm still on the board, there's no way that I'm wanting 30%. This is like, we have there's some big questions there if that's the case, because if the deficit's gone, what's the status? Like, shouldn't be inflation for 30%. But we got to get to that point, and that's where we got to show them. And here's the numbers. We're open to ideas, but you just can't make it go away. And if people see it, there's no other option. And we got to get this going. Sit in the room with them, not just send them the document, but sit in the room and present it to them with a very laid out way of doing it. Of here's what we want to do, and then. Yeah, they'll yell and scream. Everybody yells and scream. It's like, okay, not yell and scream. Are you good to go to talk about it? Probably. When you get a bill in the mail It's like, well, I wasn't expecting, when I went away, my wife and I went to Mexico. We both used their cell phones, we come back and they charge you $15 a day and you're like, oh, what? Well, I used it, so I gotta pay the bill, right? It's the same kind of thing of, you may not like it, but do you understand why? And then they can vote yes. But we gotta do that with every member of council, or at least get to the people who can say, hey,
This is sensible.
we're gonna do this. Like, it doesn't, we don't like it, but that's the way it goes. And I think the mayor will be open to that. I think Councilor Lehman will be open to that. I think our board members will be open to that discussion, that are on council and all the way through. You know, it's not just London. Yeah, London, you get London and one other, you pass the budget, but that's not the goal, right? You want everybody to be informed and at least make the choice on what they have. I think, because I have in my notes in big letters here, we got to levy for category 1 100%. That's it. That's the goal.
Goals are two, anyway.
Well.
No, 100%.
Maybe.
Yeah, fees covered part of it.
Well, fees cover, yeah, but we need to cover those category 1 costs.
And here's the sources. for
Now,
Category 1.
what we can tell them is like, okay, next year you're getting 30%. Now, if you get on board with us and help us get these fees changed. In fact, do the advocacy work, go to council and pass a resolution at every council saying we want 100% cost recovery.
Mhm.
You know, other CAs have done that. Durham region has, that was one of the problems we talked about in the bus with, one of,
Darling.
yeah, it's like, he's like, I have a resolution. I have one municipality, I have a resolution saying I need to do 100% cost recovery. And now I've got a freeze on fees. I've got a conflict here. I truly think that freeze fee can come off. They didn't do it to municipalities. Right? Municipalities can raise their fees. In fact, they probably should be, and if they're not, they should be.
So this is just another instance of downloading.
And another
These
issue-
are fees we have to recoup from the municipality.
And another,
We have to make the fight to do that.
and if we're gonna get pushback from the development community, well, then city politicians are gonna have to say, if they're not, or I'm just saying, municipal politicians are gonna have to justify, well, if you're gonna be on that side, you're gonna have to pay more. And how are you gonna justify that to your residents when you yourselves try to put as much as possible on user fees, and you probably should be. So again, when we mirror their policy, it's hard to argue against it.
Be very careful when you say that to the city of London, because their development fees cover maybe 30% of the cost, maybe.
I thought it was 27, is the figure I'd heard from
Yeah.
Alberta.
Yeah, so they ain't even close to us,
So there you go. It's like, okay,
but they're happy to subsidize the industry.
perfect. Then they can make the decision on that and they can say, hey, we actually are comfortable with that and we want to pay that. If a municipality, if all municipalities say, hey, we're comfortable with subsidizing that. We just did that, Alfred County and Ingersoll with development charges for industrial. We go, no, we don't want to charge them. We'll take care of that through other revenue because we think it's worth it. If they think it's worth it, then that gives us the credibility on our end to say, hey, then you got to pay this dollar amount. Or if you want to, and you should probably look at this as well, then you should go up to here. You tell us where you want that. And I have no problem following. We just send it.
That's an interesting angle, Brian, because it's more likely that the city of London would pay than getting the province to change it for all conservation authorities. Because City of London subsidizes industrial DCs through the tax base, subsidizes downtown and Old East development charges through tax base. So same
Subsidized
argument,
industrial land purchases through the tax.
well, et cetera. So here is just another, housing affordability. Let's call it housing affordability initiative. That we ask you to support because you're a high growth area, blah, blah, blah.
I think we need to consult with our members and say, okay, what do you want to do here? Like, that's,
but,
what's your goal?
well, yeah, but again, it's London's London's the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Because of everything we already know, right? So part of the argument is taking some of the pressure off our member municipalities by London recognizing it needs to pay more. And rather than trying maybe a business case, I don't know what it is. But isn't the argument to be made to the mayor, because it's mayor's budget now? To say, look, we've done some work. Preliminary work looks like a big number. And you've already told us we can't go to some, you cut us in the 2025 budget. Here's potentially a solution. What do you think? Christine can come up with a number.
Yeah, we have in the past been encouraged to submit special requests for growth funding.
Yeah,
It's assessment
And we
growth
did
funding.
not.
no, I know,
Yeah,
but
this
now,
would be a separate request.
but this is
I know.
different. It's now mayor
Yeah.
budget.
And I would just
Next
explain a little
time.
bit about the City of London's assessment growth funding process. We did apply and were eligible at one time. They changed the requirements. So now they first prioritize kind of the hardscaping, like whether it be roads because of more growth, more garbage pickup because of more growth. Those 10. So when it became the softer side, providing the services associated with growth, that's number 5 on the priority list. And of course, they don't have any funds. But if there's a mayor's special request, now it is the mayor's budget. Perhaps there's a little bit more flexibility to direct funds for an initiative that is tied to the high growth area and
I don't
housing
know.
affordability.
I met with a developer yesterday. I won't say where it went because I said I wouldn't. It wasn't London. It wasn't London, but I appreciate and the reason I won't was because I appreciated their openness to share real world figures about what is driving the housing cost. And it's land and the costs associated.
Yeah.
In this particular market they were in, they were $400,000 before they put a shovel in the ground for a lot.
Yeah.
So there is real things there. And then in that particular market, DCs were about to double overnight. And these do, like, so if we add fees and stuff, it does, but what we did here is that we need to know what the impact to development be, so we can present that business case, when we present that business case to our members. Because what we heard on the bus was, or at the meeting with I was at the actual meeting with the minister is that in City of Toronto, what is like $2 million for an application to go through, and it was like $12,000 to $20,000 for the fees for the Conservation Authority. So we got to argue scale there, because if you just say, well, if you want to have the initiative to offset this, the impact may be so minimal that the impact to us is huge and to the city might be bigger, but to the development community as a whole might not even make a difference. So we need to have those if we're, and to tell you the truth, as long as we have our revenue at this end, I don't care where it comes from. We gotta get to A, B and C have to add up to it. But I think we do have to, and it's one of those cases of delegation or throwing it back the other way of, oh, you want this change? Well, what do you think about it? You make the decision. I'm not very good at this with my wife, trying to figure out where to eat. She always wins this. Like, she will not tell me where. It's a classic thing of, where do you want to eat? I don't know. So it's one of those things that the best way to do it is, okay, here's your options. Choose one.
Tell us what you
And
want.
I'll be honest, my best friend is awesome at this with their kids.
Yeah.
It's like, they do this all the time ever since they're little kids. We're out at restaurants, like, well, I want the sucker. Well, you have a cookie at home. You can have the cookie or the sucker here. And they make the choice. And he's like, oh, I want a cookie at home.
That's what's worked with the golf club in St. Mary's.
So that's the
Either
thing,
let all
it's
the
like,
water out now or spend it over.
and it gives them a sense of control, because right now they're feeling like, oh, we're not a part of it, they just make the decision, we get the bill. But if you have the choose your own options. Hey, do you want to subsidize this? Do you want to pay, or do you want us to go this way? We will, at the end of the day. They've made the choice. It's really hard to get mad at us for making their choice, that they made the choice. I think that's where we feel, and I'll be honest, we're at the PEC meeting, again, I won't name the person, but we all know who it is. Gave great advice and said, you need a better lobbyist. And they're not wrong. I think we have done. And here's the deal, it's not our fault. You're a public authority, you just can't hire lobbyists because everybody would lose their mind, but we need to do a better job of informing and getting in there and having those conversations about this sort of thing, because we know it, but then it's like afterwards, we don't control the narrative. And then all of a sudden it gets out there, we're fighting the narrative, and you can't do it. But if we have, again, if someone else is making decisions, all of a sudden they're in control, now they come online and say, well, wait, no, that's what we wanted to do. I think that's the way forward, and we know where we need to go on the budget. We need to get to a balanced budget before and then we can talk reserves about when we get, well, where we get our finance house in order. After all these changes, it's all different. That's, again, it's not a fault of anybody. It's just, we gotta get it in order with these new rules. It's gotta match up. But if we can get the people on board to tell us where they want us to go and get this revenue from, that would be a big thing in 2025 to form that budget. And so the other thing I have written down here is, what we need to know in the budget. I know the budget changes, so it's only a predictor of time. We really need to spell it out, what in the budget is static and you expect not to change. And highlight the things that are dynamic. Okay, this may fluctuate. So we have a very clear thing of like, see, we told you, we don't know where this is,
Well, I think that's in the agenda for next week of what does that,
Yeah,
because it's pretty clear from your
Again,
presentation.
dumb it down. So we can give it to the partners, because they're open to information, they really are, and say, look at, this is where, if you're gonna see stuff, we don't know about this stuff. We know about this. We don't know about this. We're trying to, so don't expect everything to be exactly,
But
they should know that as a budget.
they know that because, London, as an example, showed up with a $30 million surplus, right? But London is always budgeted conservatively. It always has a surplus.
But get them to say it is an important thing. To say, yes, I understand. And then when you come back and you're like, whoa, he's like, wait a minute. We told you about this. Because at the end of the day, there's always, if someone doesn't say it at the beginning, there's always that ability to come back and be like, oh, I didn't understand. But do you understand now? And it's like, okay, no, things changed. We came at a better position than we're at. Because the important part of that is, if we come back at a better position, that's gonna feed our reserves policy. We have surplus and stuff. You gotta fight that thing of, well, I just want lower hard next time. I know we can't do that because you don't know, but people are gonna be like, well, I want that money off next time. We just lower the rate this time. No, we gotta be able to keep that money and use it to fund where we need to put it. So we need to know people that, hey, this is what we're predicting. It may not. So it's like, we told you things changed. Now we help that narrative go down the other road of saying, if we use it for this and this is the plan. So we show it going into the plan, much like their reserve stuff does. They had this argument this year. They had the surplus. What do we do with it?
Again, I think that's the easy part. Tough part is still gonna be the 2025. Okay,
And increasing
That's
the.
the message. You're not gonna like this at all.
yeah, and
You hate it.
how and who is gonna start crafting this message? Because what I'm sensing, and I don't mean to cut off any further discussion, particularly not cutting off Arjun and Dean, is do you guys agree with the kind of direction that Brian has set us in, is that we've got some communication that we need to work on? A lot of it has to do with 2025, but it also has to do with later on.
Yeah, I agree. And, my biggest thing is communication buys the time too, right? So it gives you the whole concept of working with them and, having that options, it's almost like you know, you got a McDonald's, you have combos, right? And here's an option, here's an option, here's an option.
Yeah, you
And then
customize it.
in real, you know, simplifying it is, this is what works for us. Cause London's needs are different than Stratford's needs. And, so they're gonna, you know, what might work for them might not work for us. So, you know, you need something that's kind of a common denominator that kind of works with everybody and they're. At the end of the day, as long as they walk away, you know, it feels fair. You know, and not, I won or they lost. I think it, and that's through the communication piece, I think.
I think you're 100% right to add to that is that London may want this, but for other municipalities, they may say, okay, we want to subsidize, we don't want the fees to go up because we want to subsidize. But then if I have to have a conversation with them because everybody else around the table came back, it's like, guys, like, look at, this is the feedback we're getting. Other members don't want to. How do we rectify this? Let's have a conversation here. We have to come to consensus around the board. Do you got anything else? Can you give a little bit on this of saying where we're going with that? That communication's gotta happen.
Tracy, does London consume 65% of the planning and regs time, effort, files?
I don't know for sure. Off the top of my head right now, because again, planning and regs changes over time.
But in the past,
And
you
I would go beyond planning and regs because other,
True.
thinking about all of the floodplain modeling updates, the demand on Dingman, the demand on like the EAs and the information that feeds into the
But those are
EAs.
separate contracts. If
Uh,
some of the Dingman work is.
Only, no, you're thinking more of the water quality side of things.
Okay.
This is the actual involvement of staff time to review modeling, either by the consultants or our input into it.
So again, this goes to, we need to have the discussion, especially around modeling, because that was a big thing, and regulations about what do they want the level of service to be? So we can come back with them and go, okay, to accommodate that, this is the cost for it.
A single special levy to one municipality.
But that's what we need to give
Why
that
didn't we
number,
do that before, we could have.
because it was voted on the board that they, if
They
we.
didn't want, it, remember?
Marcus brought it forward that.
Yeah, but we can change stuff.
Yeah, we do need to do it. No, I agree that if London needs a higher level of service, which they do, because if it was just London. If you take our conservation, or you take London out or just have London, it's a totally different animal.
Yeah.
So we don't need half the, we don't need half the stuff for regs and stuff that you would have if London wasn't there. So we do have to, they do have special needs.
Yeah.
So we have to, but we have to get a conversation going on what is that level of service that they need, because we don't know.
Yeah, we can enter into an agreement.
The regs say based on benefit,
Their idea.
doesn't have to be general distribution levy under the regs. Why can't most of it be general distribution and then one special benefiting levy?
Yep.
Planning and regs.
That's one option.
That.
I would say with
Allow that. The way I
So,
remember it.
'cause
same with
We
mapping.
can investigate it
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
Okay.
We need to have, that was the other thing, is where does London, which, and they're the biggest one that. We haven't heard a lot from other municipalities about level of service and planning and regs and modeling, correct?
Mhm.
Woodstock or Ingersoll or Stratford or Mitchell aren't spazzing out over the flood.
Mm, no,
No, and I get London is like, okay, it's a big thing, they're development driven, and again, when we had the conversation, you know. Council Lehman says, hey, we do have a better working relationship with the development community. But, well, what they said was, the reason I say that is because. He says, okay, they were asking for all these things, but when we sat down, it's like, okay, if you want that, you've got to do this. So I think there is spots to learn there from, like, again, from their perspective as well, of the development community, okay. We may not be able to do anything, but we learn about it and say, okay, these are the things that they're facing. And maybe we can come up with different programs and stuff to try to. It may just be, again, I think in our agenda, we see some great communication tools to try to get that to a better spot, but anyway. I'm more worried about having that 2025 budget, but we need to know what we need to put in the budget. But it needs to be there, come from them to say, what is your level of service you want it to be? So then Tracy and Christine and all the staff can go, if you want modeling at this level, this is gonna be your bill. You comfortable with that? Cause it may be about more than 30%. Make the choice of, okay, how do we get around that at this level? Okay, maybe we can go this level of service and bump it up over years to get there, or can we do contracts? Can we do modeling? We can put a fee on for modeling, so if people want, can we not provide a modeling service?
You
No?
gotta do it for the watershed.
Watershed, yeah.
The whole
Some watershed.
sub-watershed.
It's not a project.
It's not,
Project basis.
yeah, it's not simple.
And that's the problem, we're not explaining it well either, because when they were at that meeting, the narrative they put out there was like, this is simple, like, this should be done, it should,
Yeah.
blah, 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 blah. And it's like, when you get the report, which we're gonna make sure we forward off to them, it's not.
Well, anyway, sorry.
So I think the biggest thing we need, so that, sorry, digress. Coming back to how do we do this? I personally think it might be a good idea, follow that advice that we need a better lobbyist. Can we bring in a communications firm to help us craft this? Because we know the message, but maybe we're not the best people
Who
that,
pays for that?
Yeah.
Who pays for that?
Yeah, it's not budgeted,
it's not budget, but we, as a board, have the ability to allocate funds.
You wanna start trying to explain it to somebody else?
If it's not in the budget, it's not supposed to be spent.
Yeah.
Budgets change, like, that's why you have a board, like, I'm gonna give you an example of council, like, if, we can make a motion and we go, okay, we direct staff, to take funds from this, and we look for advice.
Funds from this reserve that we don't have. I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Well, we
because
do have reserves.
We do. But we're gonna cut our operating reserve for category one in half this year, if this budget comes to pass.
And I get that, and that's another point I have later, is like, okay, but what does that timeline look like if you use actuals from other?
It is.
We don't know.
actuals. The reserves are actually.
The
No,
reserves.
no, the budget, but the budget, we know it changes, right? So it's
Well,
hard to
Here's
predict,
the reserve status forecast. It's.
no, but it's based off budgets that change.
Yeah, so maybe it'll be a little bit higher.
Maybe.
I'm just saying is, do we invest? It's not, there's a difference between just spending money and making an investment. How important it is that do we get London on board and our member municipalities on board?
Very
So,
important.
it's very important.
55% impacts the budget or not.
So,
Very important.
so should we not be willing to put some resources towards that?
But first of all, well, let me back up. So we've got an agreement, I think, among the committee and staff that communicating to London is critical. That there has to be, or it would be beneficial to have some sort of shopping list, so to speak, I would pick
Options.
options. Heard a couple of ideas so far. Why don't we give staff a chance? At least initially.
Fair enough.
And I agree with that, because I think if we outsource that part, and once the other municipalities see that, they're gonna say, okay, they got this professional thing, this is not a genuine request. Maybe if staff can come up with a good solution and see how they can present it, right, then it's an internal piece, and it's a real solution that we're trying to work together. Not trying to sell you something.
The only thing I would say is this cannot be a hugely technical.
Yeah.
It has got to be very simple, and it's got to be to the point where if we can hand it, we go out, find the first person on the trail and hand it to them, they better understand it. Because even though we got people at the table who are elected officials who deal with stuff, I guarantee you the workload, they're not gonna have time to sit, they're not gonna take the night and sit down and go through and figure stuff out. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, no, I think we all agree
Okay.
with you that our approach to this has to be different than our usual approach. Less technical, less verbiage, different format, whether it's a do you know format. Well, what about this? Well, then here's a one-line answer. Or whatever methodology that staff can develop for us has to, again, I think focusing on category one. These are the things that we have to deliver. Here's where the money comes from, including some of the category three stuff, whatever. I don't know, that may complicate it, I don't know. But here's the gap. And we could do this in a couple of different ways, whatever they are, you know, we've enumerated some of them. And come back here, or maybe right to the board at the June meeting to say, here's our draft. Because we're already working on 2025 budget.
Yeah.
It's scary. I don't even want to show them how scary, but that it is scary. And here's what we're thinking as a finance and audit committee and staff, how to get over this hurdle.
I agree.
Because we don't want to show up in the fall with a big number and have you go, ain't gonna happen.
And I think the best way to do that is just put out, here's the issues that we face in point form. The rules have changed. You have to do this. Now you have to come up with this funding. This amount is what we have to come up with. Blah, blah, blah.
And the
then,
province isn't putting in.
so this is not, an option is this, an option is not this, an option. So here are your options.
Yeah.
So it's like, you get the mindset first of, here's the problem.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, these are the options that I have to choose from. Very simple, because that's what we face as the board.
And you'll have to illustrate, Brian, what options were previously available but aren't anymore, and attach a dollar figure to that
Yes.
to illustrate the impact of change.
And that's what I would say is the same thing with category three. It's like, oh, why don't we use category three, the funding we pay for category fee to fund category one? Because this would happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of simple.
Show that relationship.
So that takes it right, those are the things I don't want to say you want to narrow something down. Because there is options there for people, like there is real options for our
But we
members.
want to cut off that option in.
We want to,
1%.
yeah, we want to show that why that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
And those are the things that we need to be able to, I guess you're trying to give some. If we can make it simple and it comes down, it's like, okay, I choose, well, now I can choose A, B, or C, knowing the information I need to know.
Yeah, because I envisioned something like to say, well, why don't you just get more money from the province? Well, it's not so simple. The province has already frozen fees. We don't expect they're going to unfreeze them for all the CAs. Well, why don't you do this? Oh, well, here's an option. Yes, we could. We could also do, and just almost conversational.
Then we can have that conversation. And then any ideas were like, put them out there, like get the feedback from people. If you think there's something like, that's awesome, we'll take it.
And one of those, well, why don't you just stop? Well, we'll stop funding your category three and solve the problem for you. Well, if we do that, we lose rather than gain.
You have to highlight the fact that we lose the leverage, like Christine said.
Yeah, so what I like where we're going with this, and I like the idea of simple. My idea of simple is conversational,
Yes.
you know, much less text, bullet points, whatever.
If they
But
do
let's
want
leave it
information, we can provide, but they're
Yeah.
probably, and we need to be able to back it up. We know we
Oh, yeah.
will, but these are factual things that are 100%. And these will, and then you have your options. You know, you could raise fees. Do you want to subsidize that? This is what happens.
I want to take a second to point something out that is probably not well known or understood. And that is the relationship of our capital budget to our operating budget. Our capital budget that we approved this year has a deficit of $2.5 million. Now, a lot of that is campground spending, set that aside. Flood control, category one, deficit in capital spending is a couple $100,000 planned. When we overspend or we don't get enough levy in category 1 capital programs, we're still gonna do those projects. We will not have the revenue to pay for the future depreciation, which is the 1.2 million that turns up on the operating budget. Capital spending for flood control is special benefiting levy. If we don't levy the specific municipality for the capital project and we run deficits in capital spending, it becomes a general distribution problem. So the way that we're not levying for capital projects and proceeding to do the work because member municipalities don't have enough money, not London, but others. It's turning the problem into a general distribution problem.
Sorry.
London's growth problems becoming a challenge.
You said that they don't have enough money, so they don't pay what they're supposed to?
No, we don't ask them to pay,
Charged as well.
Yeah,
or we spread out the payments over a number of years. There's a very distinct thing happening, I've seen, with respect to the category 1 capital flood control projects and how we levy or we don't levy for them, or whether we levy or not because we have a little kitty, a reserve already created. So when we don't levy, when we do the spending, we don't have the revenue to cover the future depreciation.
We gotta stop that.
Well, I quite agree.
yeah, but
I agree.
how much of that is part of our 2025 problem?
At the moment, nothing, because we don't have a 2025 budget yet.
It was the 2024.
But we can fix it for 2025, $200,000 over the next 40 years. It's small, but doing so over the last 40 years has resulted in the $1.2 million of depreciation that doesn't have revenue associated with it.
But this is one of those detailed pieces.
I know you don't want to communicate
Stay
this,
away from.
but you need to
Yeah,
know
yeah,
because it's a
sure.
finance issue and it does speak to how we get our levy. There's a very big difference between the general levy
Yeah,
that London has to approve at the board table and the special benefiting levy and our capital projects.
yeah.
Very different beasts, but they do connect and they
Influence one.
and they influence one another exactly in ways that we may not see easily. So
This is where we need to allocate the cost to where they should be going according to things.
we need to levy for the cost.
That's why we need to have, and I have this written down, is what we, on our capital side, a special benefiting levy, we need to have those discussions with our municipalities about, I don't care who keeps the money or where it is, as long as the money's ready to come. If they want to keep their bank account and get interest off it or whatever, or we need to talk to them and go, we need to talk about debt. Because some of these issues, some of these things, they have a lifespan. You know, if Ingersoll's looking at building an arena, yeah, that's a debt thing to me. Doing your like roads every year shouldn't be a debt thing. Like but if you have a flood control structure like that, you should be expecting, like that has a lifespan. And it may be more palatable and maybe more feasible for, again, we gotta give them that option about, do you wanna pay up front every year for this? Or are you okay? Now, there's an operational side to debt, as with assets, you know, you have a depreciation or you have debt payments that goes on the operational side as soon as you do the capital. But that may be more palatable over the long term. But if to me, it's a missable decision. They gotta provide the funding either way. And maybe they take out the debt. I don't know. They can't take out the debt. They don't have the asset to take the debt out on. They can't,
Well, municipality can get
but they can't
raise
take,
funds better than we can.
but they can't take a debenture out on an asset they don't own.
That's why I was asking the borrowing questions.
So we could borrow, but they would be responsible for paying the bill. That's what we would levy them every year.
That's.
And that would have to be an agreement, but I think we do need to have that discussion on these, because some of these, because I'll be honest, if you have to place the Fullerton Dam,
We want to be a bank.
But that's
They have to be though. We don't want to be, but because like Brian said earlier, the paradigm's shifting. We may have to be like the tile loans. Let's use a a simple example, municipalities offer tile loans to landowners. And in effect, the municipality becomes the bank. The money comes from the province and dispersed the municipality, but over time, the landowner repays the municipality. And even just simple drainage projects, the municipality issues a tender, okay, they're gonna drain this watershed. All the Drainage Act allocates the payment or the cost to each of the individual landowners.
So
But
benefit.
the municipality is the one basically holding the bag in the interim until the project's finished.
So there's a
And there's a special benefiting levy anyway. And without
That's the
taking
nature
out
of
the
a special-
debt.
Exactly.
But we're just
Mitchell.
kicking this down the road every
Yeah,
year.
yeah, sure,
It's
yeah, yeah,
coming like now,
yeah.
other municipalities, I mean, including Stratford. We had a big tax levy this year, and it was because the previous years, it was a 3%, 4%, because they want to keep everybody happy.
Yeah.
Or everything else is falling apart.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That is our history.
Yes.
Either I kick it down the road and my kids will pay for it, which will never get, and by that time, that dam's gonna break, or.
Yeah.
We just had to bite the bullet this year, and we had to do it, we were at a 12.5 roughly, we brought it down to about a 7 and a bit, But that was the letter that we had to communicate to everybody that I communicated, you say, hey, here's inflation. We do nothing, this is what it is. However, if you want your roads, you want this, we're focusing on this, and this is yesterday's problems we have to fix today, or we're never gonna have that. Sooner or later, we're gonna have to, if we're not making the dialogue, the next board will be.
Yeah.
Or they're gonna kick it down the board or down the road.
Well, that's what's happened with our budget and on our levy and our reserves.
But then that's why we have done these conversations.
System.
The Mitchell Dam is, Perth has to pay, like West Perth 100%, right? If something needs major on that, they probably can't come up with the funding and they can't get debentures for it, so. We are responsible for it, they have to pay for it, so we have to have those conversations about how can that municipality meet their obligations to pay for it, and it may become, okay, we may have to issue debt. There's nothing wrong with debt if you have the payments to make it. On a certain projects, but these are large scale projects, there's no way the ore dam is gonna be replaced, if it was a city asset, there's no way they're gonna replace that and just hand the cash over, they're gonna have to put that on a debenture. So we have to look at that the same way. We just maybe, at the end of the day, we're responsible for it, but we have to, we just can't come up with capital. We just have to look at different ways of funding these things and giving options. Other words, you're gonna face a lot of backlash. Now, if we can offset that, great, with WECI funding or whatever, we always do that anyway, but, or we try to. So it's one of those things where but that's an option that we can do to try to look at funding those capital needs. I don't know how we work we don't have any debt, so I don't know how we issue debt. Is it private market debt or can it fall under?
It's a loan. The last debt we had was a loan
Water
for the
system.
water system.
Yeah.
Okay,
It was capital spend.
Yeah,
so that
For the
becomes,
authority.
that comes
not
up at-
for a member municipality.
yeah.
that comes up a different subject there of ownership. Who owns the Mitchell Dam?
We operated.
It's on our books as an asset, but that doesn't mean we actually own it.
So, but then it becomes a conversation of who does own the asset, because if it is Perth, or like West Perth that owns it, they might be all the debenture for it.
Yes. But we may not own it, but we may be responsible for it, and it's an asset on our record. It's weird, but that's the way it is with the.
No, and that's fine, but it's just trying to figure out.
Plans around it, yeah.
That goes back to the original agreement when it was
Yeah,
created.
yeah, we own the bottom of Piddock Reservoir too.
Okay.
No, I
That's land.
I'm wondering if we
Okay,
could
sorry.
kind of call this one
Yeah.
to, kind of
Okay.
parking lot it, because if I understood what you had said, it's a part of this, but it's a smaller part than dealing with the operating parts of category one that we're trying to communicate to our member municipalities.
Yes, but depreciation is 10% of the problem with category one.
Yeah,
And that comes through capital spending decisions, and those are impacting how and when we ask for levy. We asked for $17,000 of levy for ORDM this year, but we plan to spend $300,000. To me, that's a problem.
So where did the other money come from, reserves?
It will, let's hope there is reserves.
and
I don't know what the
WECI,
ORDM reserve looks like right now.
and WECI.
And
right?
like,
If-
Yeah, half of that's supposed to come from WECI,
Yeah,
but
So do those projects go forward? Do those projects go forward without it?
pardon me, would,
Projects go forward without WECI? If we don't get WECI project funding,
depends on
it
the,
depends on the project.
on the project. There's some that are, yep, this cannot wait. The dam safety review is saying this is a high priority, and there's some.
And then the municipality pays 100% of the cost.
and how is that? How is that put towards how is that message given to the municipality?
capital levy.
It's a capital levy, yeah.
They pay 100%, they get stuff back if you get WECI funded?
Hmm?
They would pay 100% of the cost and get a rebate?
Well,
No,
So the municipality whose structure it's in is supposed to pay 100%. Full stop,
Depending on the structure.
depending on the structure. When we get levy, or when we get WECI, their obligation falls to 50%. But the rule is they pay 100%.
and what they were levied for then ends up in deferred revenue,
Yes,
right?
to cover the future depreciation. As long as we levy for it when we're doing the work.
So I think that's where we need to look at, as our asset management plan gets better. It'd be
Yes.
better to levy, okay, 20,000 every year and go after 5 years and go, I need 100,000.
Yeah, and different municipalities have different desires on that score.
some municipalities are like, nope, we're keeping all the money in our accounts. We're
Okay.
accumulating interest on those. Others are like, nope, we don't like single jumps. We just put it in the kitty, the special
Yeah,
specified
goes into
reserve. And we're gonna
Is
budget
that
for that. each year.
formalized through agreements?
No,
No,
It needs to
It
be.
should be.
well,
It should be, because I had this discussion with my counselors last week. For as many times as I told them about the difference between operating levy and special benefiting levy, they still don't get it. So if
Because
they
we-
don't get it, the staff won't get it either. So I agree with Brian's point. It should be written in the agreement.
I don't care where the money is, as long as it's in an account earmarked for this, because other words, someone's gonna go, oh, there's money in that account. But they don't know about it, and also we gotta pay that, we gotta have it, and it's like, I don't care, you guys gotta come up with this, you're supposed to have it, cause it says so right here. If we don't have those agreements in place to say, this is again, every municipality could be different, but if we don't have that saying, this one does it this way. City of London could have, they could have $10 million sitting in a bank account for what they need to do, as long as we tell them to. They get the interest off it. At the end of the day, all we care about is enough money to pay the bill at the end. But if we don't have that agreement saying, this is what we're gonna do,
but we don't have agreements for levy.
yeah.
It's a levy.
Yeah, they must pay.
They must pay.
but there's it's a memorandum of understanding of this is how this is supposed to work. Because it saves you later going on when you all of a sudden,
Why do you need an agreement or memorandum of understanding for a tax?
To remind them of the obligation.
Well, I agree there, and that's a communication issue, but it is a levy. And so if we find that we need to do a capital repair on a structure and it belongs to whoever, we can levy 100% for that.
Don't
I know, but
make
you've
this
taken-
more- Don't make this more complicated.
oh, I'm not trying to be more complicated. I'm trying to say so you guys aren't here in 20 years, right?
Yeah,
We're not here in 20 years.
that's what I'm getting.
Some municipalities want to give you money to put away. Is there finite, okay, how much money has Stratford given you?
How do you track it?
How does much money?
We track it. It's,
Yeah.
it's in the Stratford, it's in the.
And if
that's-
Christine isn't here, her successor.
But also they changed.
Your finance guy isn't there,
It's just about knowledge of everybody being on the same page.
But how deep into the weeds do you want to go? Particularly with a municipal council.
What I'm hearing now from
Typically, these
municipal council
conversations- Well, typically, these conversations happen between staff.
Yeah,
So it's our water resources engineering group that are putting together the WECI applications, that are having the conversations with staff at the municipality to say, hey, this is on our project list, or, oh, we just completed the dam safety review. These are the recommendations that came out of the dam safety.
I'm looking at
Sometimes they're
flood reserve
estimates.
policy there, and it says we have to make sure our infrastructure is adequate to take care of it. Do you think London councils around the table are fully aware that that's one of them?
Oh, I think they know, they pay 100% of that dam.
The counselor?
You
maybe,
don't think they do?
but
I don't think
councilors,
counselors do.
Some let on, they don't.
some do, some don't. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys are on councils, you know, you.
Does it matter what we know, because that's more side of the operating side.
Yeah,
The problem is what we're
exactly. It's not the governance side.
It's-
And as one staff member at the City of London told councilors one day was, you're all the temporary help.
I get it, but we're,
Realistically, it's true.
listen to what he just said earlier. The budget, the budget increase was up, it's political, it's like, 2%, 3%, 1%, 0%. And now we have asset management mandated to municipalities from the province, and everybody's going, oh, shit,
Yeah, yeah, they are.
I didn't know we had these responsibilities out there.
Yeah, just like we're going,
So,
yeah, shit.
well, and that's the thing, is like, so, because everybody's going, well, how do we get away with the minimum, even though we're not, so it's imperative now more than anything that everybody knows
What price is.
what the actual true price is, so they can go, wait a minute. Now the people in our position gotta go, we gotta fix this, and we actually gotta maybe it's not an 8% increase, maybe it needs to be a 10.
Well, okay, if you can figure out a simple way of adding that capital piece to the
I don't know, that's-
explanation.
Yeah,
But if not,
Yes, if not.
but I
don't.
think it's
Because-
guiding.
Because
The rural ones are worse off because they didn't they didn't have the resources, now they have to do it, and now you're seeing, like, I know at Oxford County, you're seeing a lot of people around the table rural go,
yeah,
oh, we're screwed.
yeah,
Mhm.
and that's kind of what we're helping. I like what we've talked
Yeah.
about today, because I think we've got a plan
Okay.
for communicating the category one challenge and giving a menu of options of how to deal with it. And keeping it simple in terms of explanation and conclusion, I think is going to be critical.
Yeah.
To getting it accepted. And if we could bring it as a test, I mean, this is just a suggestion, to the board in June, then, you know, some of the individual discussions that you could have mayor to mayor.
Yeah.
Because I think London's the only one that has a mayor power budget, right? Out of all our member
Yes.
municipalities. If you and Mayor Morgan can have a discussion and he can understand it, that puts us about 80% of the way, right? Because then it can be shared or talked about with municipal councils.
It's gonna be baby steps, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a shift. Right? And I believe it's gonna be slowly, because if we just flood them with the information, it's gonna be information overload.
There's a problem last year, we didn't know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so totally new, we were learning, what we were learning last year, it's a different way, it's hard to get that information.
But you don't have the resources,
For information
to
today.
down and learn it.
Yeah.
right? Like the bigger municipalities have more resources, more
Yeah.
expertise, right? Where the smaller ones don't have those resources or those expertise. So some understand, some don't, right? And then that's what happened to a number of us.
Do you remember when we brought the compensation review cost options to the board?
Mhm.
That's something that you're thinking of maybe for levy funding for category one?
Something
How
similar.
to phase it in?
Mhm.
Do we do 100% of the new cost in 2025? and
Or-
then go down?
Or what we talked about earlier was special benefiting levy. You, City of London, you may want to subsidize our costs for planning
many.
in order for us to manage the costs, work, blah, blah, blah. So it's that, it may not necessarily be phasing may be one of the options, I don't know. You're gonna have to tell us if that's viable. But it's more along the lines of, you know, it's a 30%, here's category one. Here's what we're forecasting for 2025. Here are options to deal with it. Full levy, special levy, to London, subsidy. An option, ask the province to allow all conservation authorities to go back to 100% fund, or to allow 100% funding if they want of development fees. Yeah, that's a menu of options, and in our review of them, it's, yeah, we could go to the province and get that, but very low probability. So we think the best options are A, B, and C, or to pick from our menu. We're taking off.
I wouldn't give them a recommendation. It should be in the information that the conclusion is kind of.
It should become
determine-
obvious.
It should become obvious, or allow them to make the choice, because as soon as you go, oh, we would recommend this.
Fair enough.
But also, if we could, I don't like the option of, if we give the people the option of phasing, look what happened to environmental targets.
Yeah.
Also true.
We need to get to a spot, we need to go, how do you wanna get there? But we need to get there, and even if it is phased in over 2 years, it is, you're committing to this. Not, we don't wanna hear next year, oh, well, yeah, it's a rough year, so we can't do that, we gotta, cause we'll never get there.
Right.
Rip the Band-Aid off,
Here's a rough year.
Yeah, exactly.
that's all we hear.
It is, sorry.
Never heard a resident say, oh, it's a great year.
Yeah.
Anymore.
Raise my taxes more. Yeah. Nobody will, everybody's overtaxed except that rich person over there.
My neighbor, he can fan.
And
So I just don't like, I'm scared of giving
Too many options.
the options of
Yeah.
going, well, I really don't wanna do,
Mhm.
so I'll put it off, like.
Yep.
Procrastination.
Okay.
We do need to make, and some of the best ways to make that argument of, is going in and just being super on the one end of, you're gonna hate this, you're gonna kill us, you're gonna throw us off the building, your head's gonna explode. And they go, okay, well, maybe, if you go in like the opposite way and be like, and then it is worse than it is.
Yeah, that's worse.
We gotta be very honest at the board, and everybody's like, this is not fun, this is horrible, but this is not what we wanna do, but this is the situation we're in. It's not our fault, it is. It may be, there's some previous decisions that happened, but right now we gotta fix this, you can fix it, what do you wanna do?
One of the things that I think that's gonna need to be addressed in that simple language is, one of the other options that people will talk about is, so why don't you lay off people? Why don't you fire people? Why don't you have people do 2 jobs? We have to include in that dialogue why that isn't possible, or that, yes, those people will no longer be on our payroll after this work is done.
Category
This
one's
work
pretty easy.
during 2025 has to be done.
Yeah.
Whatever. But again, I'm just going back to what we heard from some of our own members.
Yeah.
So it's kind of anticipating what's not on our menu that may be on other people's menus.
And the answer to that one is, in some situations, like, wait a minute. You actually want a higher level service.
Yeah.
This is maintain the service we got now.
Yeah.
So if you wanna talk about this, you can't talk about that. But yeah, no, I agree with you 100%, because that's always gonna come up of, what is the 5 staves agree,
Yeah.
there, like, the same thing, it's, oh, and then you accept it, and that's hopefully what we wanna get to, is acceptance. And then we have a way forward as an organization.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if we have a place where we can actually formalize a recommendation that we can pass. And it might be something along the line of multiple parts of it. So one would be that we receive the report and we direct staff to develop a reserve policy based on the reserve policy discussion paper and discussions. Yeah. So can I get a motion to that effect? Are you okay with that? Is that livable?
I'm okay with that.
We talked about reserve policy.
We didn't, right?
We didn't, but we had a big discussion previously. Ryan, you sent a copy of London's policy.
Right.
There's technically there's draft policy in this
Yeah.
discussion paper. So I'm thinking, Christine, you gotta tell me otherwise, that you're in a position to be able to bring back a reserve policy.
Yes, except we haven't talked about specifics about how much reserve we want to target and how we're gonna get there.
Well, I'm personally relying on
Okay,
you to
I'll
come
put-
up with
Put something in
something.
there. Okay,
rather than us firing off numbers. And your documentation will explain why you think that's right. And maybe, and an option is.
Yeah.
Going back to, I think you made the point earlier, Brian, that the reserve should cover the riskier, I call them the riskier items that may or may not get funded.
Well, yeah, I think we need to know why, like, why are we, if we need to reserve, what reserves are needed, why and how much? Because there's different ones for different things, right? And obviously, like you said, category 3,
It's in good shape.
well, no, it's not. But it's like, there's different things about it, like, there's different risks to that level of, and throughout, because it's so broad that there's programs in there that would dictate, okay, if we don't get the funding, this doesn't happen, so we probably don't need a reserve to cover that amount. But, there's other things that do have to happen that we do need to have, so we need, that would say water quality testing across the lake and all that stuff, there's certain things that have to happen. So what level of funding do we need to make sure that happens to try to, and obviously you guys have the operational knowledge to come back and say what that is with the different things. That's what I expect to see in those numbers is what's the risk to our operations from does it have to happen to, it doesn't have to happen at all? And, what's the risk of funding to making that happen? At the end of the day, like I said, levy on category 1 stuff. We have the ability, we need a reserve and basically, in the perfect world, where do we gotta go to make sure that, we can continue stuff? At the end of the day, we have the ability to, so the risk is less. But I think, you guys have the information and expertise on all those things to try to bring, I agree with Sandy.
So you're okay with the resolution as it is?
Yes.
Motion.
Defining the need for a reserve and how much for category 1 operations depends entirely on how and if it's fully funded.
Fair enough.
And if the desire is to head to a balanced category 1 place, then it's easy to pick what the reserve should be, some percentage of annual operating costs for category 1. But until we're actually balanced, knowing how much of reserve in category 1 we should have is.
So that's, I would say,
It's a dark.
and I would say that's the assumption that I would go off of. Because that's where we have, I don't see another option not to get there.
Well, we passed a budget with a deficit category 1.
We can't keep doing that.
Well, yeah, correct, but how long do you, or what kind of stomach do you think people have to continue with that at least somewhat over a couple of
Let me
years?
put it this way, I would say that this reserve policy would only come into effect at a certain threshold. So it would be designed off that, whatever that, if it's 90%, again,
90% levy funding for category 1.
yeah, or where you would, I would, again, bow to your expertise on it, where you would think it is, but we can't start putting money in reserves if we can't pay the bills, right? So we have the policy, but it only comes into effect if we're
If you
it's
are,
like a dividend policy, if you don't make any money, you can't have any dividends.
Right, fair enough, yeah.
And category 3 might be different than they're all, I don't know if you
Yeah,
probably don't need one for
maybe-
category
Yeah.
2, but you know what I mean, like,
No,
Yeah,
No,
and it was clear in
Yeah.
the discussion paper that they'd be different, so.
Yeah.
I don't wanna put a timeline on when that comes back, but certainly.
no, because
before-
we have to do the investment.
Yeah, so. But. Kind of maybe concurrent with the budget in August, yeah.
But the draft, are we thinking of a draft budget in June? You see to the board,
I don't think it'll be a draft budget, but budget concepts perhaps.
no numbers?
But I'm thinking.
We'll see how the end of this
Yeah.
next week goes.
Yeah, I think.
Simple
Their
language.
timeline.
the same thing that we're sending to that, that's what I would present to the board for budget concept discussions.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. But as far as the reserve policy, just kind of August is kind of where it's at,
Yeah,
so.
that's time enough for this.
So can I get a motion to that effect?
Oh,
Sure. Sandy, can I read the
Oh,
motion?
please,
I,
good, great.
a little bit, actually, I just took what was already on the screen and modified it. That the Finance and Audit Committee receives this report for information and directs staff to develop a reserve policy based on the discussion paper and feedback received from the committee.
Sounds good. Can I get a mover? Moved by Harsh, seconded by Brian. Further discussion on that recommendation? Right,
The only thing like we talked about before is if we can have it kind of mirror. If we can take that London Reserve policy and kind of language wise and as much as possible.
Yeah.
Try to make some similarities, so people are familiar with one, they can go with the next.
Yeah.
That would be my only input on that.
It will be different, though.
It will be different,
We're
but
not a
different,
municipality.
we're not, but
We don't have the restrictions in the financial restrictions that municipalities have.
and we don't have to have statutory reserve.
We can invest in anything we
we
want.
don't, but it's more of a
Yeah, yeah.
formatting.
Yeah, that's,
Formatting and language
Yeah.
used.
yeah, I think that message is. Okay. Well, you're okay then? Okay. Gary?
Okay, but
And then really the second piece of this is a recommendation that we direct staff to develop a, I don't know, call it a budget communication piece. Dealing with, based on feedback received from the committee today.
I'll make that motion.
Is that Harsh? Is that specific enough to give you marching orders, so to
Yeah, I've
speak,
been taking
on,
notes.
on some sort of document to come in June to the board that is a draft of what we've talked about in terms of helping provide municipalities, primarily London, with some options to deal with the challenges of category 1 funding.
Mhm.
When is our June finance and audit committee meeting?
Well, oh, well.
The board-
do-
after-
do you
but it's-
want-
After board, okay.
Yeah.
We have a hearing.
So the June Finance and Audit Committee is following the board meeting, right, in June. So I am thinking that this paper goes right to the board without coming to the committee.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, you know, we didn't have to discuss it at the, if it was before the finance and audit committee could get a sneak peek. But it's not gonna work out logistically. And we have the stuff on.
Unless you want to have a special meeting of this committee to,
Or near June
Or if you could circulate it to the committee.
for feedback.
Tracy's gonna be running with that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you could circulate that
Yeah.
to the finance and audit committee for feedback, as long as we're not required to apply all, that's,
yeah,
I think that would be,
yeah, I think I like that idea.
Like a sample communication
Mhm.
piece.
Right, yeah,
just before it goes to the full board.
yeah,
If we
before it
can,
gets
you know,
into the
Into the
agenda
agenda
pack.
package.
That
Yeah.
way, we're just,
So it's just some second set of
Sec-
eyes or.
yeah, right.
Based on the discussion, this is
Yeah.
we
aligning.
can give feedback on, oh yeah, this is what we were, that's
Yeah.
bang on.
So, Michelle, do you have a resolution for it?
It's got a lot of spelling errors and I hope I can read it. A recommendation it's that the Finance and Audit Committee direct staff to develop a budget communications piece based on feedback received from the committee, say at this meeting. Um. And that's what I have. Did you want to add, to,
I don't,
That may be enough.
it's enough because I think that, let's face it, we gotta get, if it doesn't come back in June. We're way behind to be able to get this out to our partners anyway, so.
Other than to say that document be part of the June board agenda, I think the recommendation is.
As part of the budget concepts
Right, as part of the
Yes.
budget.
There we go.
concepts
document.
Document of plan for the June agenda.
is that being added to the recommendation?
Yeah,
I did not get that. I was.
Yeah.
So the communications piece as part of the budget concepts. Before to the board in June.
that puts Tracy on the spot to make sure it gets into the June agenda.
And it does.
That makes her
it
accountable.
goes ahead.
I can have those conversations with our partners too, like, okay, well,
Oh, yeah.
we need to have this conversation, we're gonna have something on the board in June.
Yeah.
Expect to have those conversations soon afterwards, right?
Yeah.
Or if not before.
Sorry for rushing this, but I don't see any other.
No,
way around
no.
it at this stage.
We knew with London's push too, their budget requests.
Well, yeah, they're-
Earlier and earlier,
you're-
it's
you're right.
July now, so.
and given that, they have their marching orders from the mayor's budget is
Yeah.
that our ask is less.
We need to educate,
Yeah,
and he's open.
yeah, please.
Read it back one more time.
Yep.
With that piece added. The Finance and Audit Committee directs staff to develop a budget communications piece based on feedback received from the committee at this meeting, and that it be added to the budget concepts report going to the board in June. Got it?
So somebody move that? Moved by Dean.
Already did.
Yeah.
By Brian and Howard.
Good, okay. Further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Carry. Gentlemen, is there anything else we need to discuss? Management, is there anything we need to discuss?
No. Keep us busy. There's lots going on in
Seeing nothing else, can I get a motion to adjourn? Moved by Dean. Thanks. I think it really was helpful for everybody to be in the same room to have this discussion. I know Paul couldn't make